the one and only Mark Levin. Take a look. Mark, thanks so much for being with us tonight. We're delighted to have you on Justice for the first time. Let's go right to the quick here. Under the Constitution, you say that the president cannot be indicted. So what is the point of all that's been going on with Mueller and his team?
First of all, it's an honor to be with you. You're a great lawyer.
Thank you.
A couple of things here on the constitutional level. No, Mueller cannot on his own indict a sitting president. I've talked about this for 18 months, so now even the professors who show up on Fox comprehend what I'm talking about. That's the position of the Department of Justice in their two memos. It's always been their position. So the question is now, can they subpoena the president? Well, they can subpoena whomever they want. The issue is, how does the president respond to a subpoena? And the president should respond to the subpoena depending on what the subpoena says. If the subpoena seeks information from the president, either in person or otherwise, that raises questions about presidential prerogatives, he must not reply. A prosecutor appointed by a deputy attorney general as acting attorney general and is a subordinate to the president doesn't get to question the president's prerogatives and the president exercising those prerogatives, and that's why that cannot be obstruction of justice. Judge, think for a second. If the opposite were the case, then a president can be hit time and time and time again with threats of charges against him for obstruction because he fires somebody. So you would have an FBI director who could theoretically politically blackmail the president of the United States if he even thinks about firing him, or a CIA director, anybody of the sort.
Well, I believe that that's already going on because Jim Comey was the head of the FBI. If there was a problem, he could have started an investigation. He gets fired and then decides he needs to leak and get an investigation, get things out in the public square. But if Mueller were to subpoena, to what end is the subpoena?
To no end. Mueller has nothing, and he wants to get something. He thinks the president is Martha Stewart. He's not Martha Stewart. He's president of the United States. Now, I want to make this clear. Mr. Mueller is nothing but a single prosecutor. We have thousands of prosecutors in this country. We have one president of the United States. He ran against 16 or 17 other Republicans in primaries. People came out in various states and voted for him. He participated in debates. He participated in the electoral process. He went through the general election. He won the general election. The American people knew who they were voting for. He won fair and square through our Constitution. You cannot have a single prosecutor accountable to no one, elected by nobody, having the power to take down a sitting president of the United States.
Okay, but
that's the bottom line.
It's even worse than that. With all due respect, what they're looking at are the actions that President Trump took while he was in office. Given you cannot indict a president, and given that they're looking at things he did as president, that means that every time the opposing party feels like it, if they can get somebody in the Justice Department to say, we need to investigate the president for doing this, I mean, it's nonsense. There's no end. You subpoena what for? So that they can create an impeachment document? This is lunacy. Should the president fire Mueller?
Well, I wouldn't fire him right now. I mean, I think he has Mueller on the ropes, believe it or not. The president wraps himself in his constitutional prerogatives, and he dukes it out. And the fact is that Mr. Mueller shouldn't be issuing any subpoenas. If he really wants questions answered by the president to fill gaps in his massive investigation of nothing, then that's one thing. But he doesn't have that. So what we have here, which is different than every other case that a president's been involved in, as far as I know, we have this broad effort to ask broad questions to try and catch a president that may disagree with one of the 450,000 witnesses that Mr. Mueller's already interviewed. That's not how this works. That's not how it's ever worked in the past. They're supposed to be very, very narrow, related to some conduct of the president of the United States. There's been no conduct of the president of the United States that merits any criminal investigation. You want to know how I know that, Judge? Because when Mr. Mueller was appointed, There was no criminal statute that was cited by Mr. Rosenstein in his appointment in the first place.
Well, you know, Rosenstein is another one that apparently there were some members of Congress wanted to impeach. Paul Ryan, the leadership, wouldn't let them go forward with it. I mean, it's almost as though the establishment is in line with the Democrats based on a false dossier paid for by Hillary Clinton. She's at the genesis of all of this. But let me ask you this. You and I both know that the president, and we both know he does want to talk. And it's every lawyer around him who's saying this shouldn't be done, not just because we want you to or we don't, but constitutionally it shouldn't be done. What do you think the president's base wants here?
I think his political base wants the president of the United States to fire everybody, but he better not do that.
Why?
Because I think that because every Democrat in the House and a third of the Republicans in the Senate will vote to impeach him. What's the point of that? When I think he can win it, duking it out through the system. Now, if it comes to the point where he needs to fire people, then by God, he has the right to fire people. But we're talking about the political outcome. So I don't think it's wise for the President of the United States to start firing all these people. There may be a time for that, by the way. He claims to represent freedom of the press. Press doesn't represent freedom of the press. Nobody's attacking freedom of the press. They have a First Amendment right. Unlike Obama, the president hasn't sicked the FBI on individual reporters or news operations or anything of the kind. So the press is free to be bombastic, and they have many drama queens in the press who really aren't reporters. They are big mouths. They are trying to promote themselves. And you know what they're doing? They're making it more and more difficult for the people to get the news, to get information. And they're making it more and more difficult for this administration and this republic to function. They're not contributing to society in any positive way. I'm not saying they have to agree with the president, but day in and day out to try and sabotage the president and make it impossible for him at times to govern, that is unacceptable. That's not a free press. These are radicals dressed up as reporters who have as their purpose to undermine the president. As for liberalism, well, it's not liberalism anymore. It's statism and progressivism. These are radicals. Just listen to their leadership and so forth. You want to impeach a president of the United States the day he's elected? The day he's inaugurated? That's not what the impeachment clause says. We know what that's about. The framers discussed it at the Constitutional Convention. You don't just get to impeach a president because you disagree with him or you put a bunch of phony arguments together. The left wants to reverse the outcome of the last election. They don't like the outcome of the last election.
And they're disenfranchising everybody who voted to put Donald Trump in the Oval Office. But how does this all end, Mark?
Well, I'm not sure, but I do know this. If they succeed in impeaching the president, and they won't remove him because he'll never have the votes in the Senate, but just impeaching the president, you're going to have over 60 million Americans who voted for this president who are going to be furious. You cannot have what I've been calling the silent coup take place, where the left has tried to criminalize the election with Mueller, tried to politicize and reverse the election with this phony impeachment issue. You cannot reverse the votes, disenfranchise over 60 million Americans, and act like it's no big deal and pretend there was a basis for it. So this divide that we have in the nation, and we often have divides in this nation, I do not think it's something that can be fixed very quickly, because you are disenfranchising the American people. You're not attempting to remove a president of the United States simply because you disagree with them. That's not America. That's some banana third world republic south of the border.
And finally, when you talk about a revolution, have you ever seen it this bad?
The Civil War was bad. I mean, we've had the riots in the 1960s was bad. What's different here to me is the institutionalization of the statist progressive agenda, which means you're not allowed to elect a president from the outside who wants to change what's going on in this country, even if the American people want to change it. Okay. The left felt that they were going to have their third term of Barack Obama. They were 100% sure that Trump couldn't win. He wins, and now they have spent 24/7 trying to destroy him, undermine. And by the way, destroy and undermine his supporters. The media in this country and the Democrat Party in this country are attacking a big faction of the American people day in, day out, calling us Nazis, cultists, racists. You know, it's almost not even aimed at Trump.